she never be pretending. Nothing that's real. She gon' tell you what she bought it, cause she know you can't afford it. Know you can get it.
Hello, welcome to the E Spot with Camille. I am your host, Camille Cower, and I am so excited for you to meet my guest from the Kaleidoscope Project, Iantha Carley. She is a designer and she's been working on this project during the pandemic, I might add, and a beautiful project it has turned out to be. But let's go back to the very beginning. How did you get into the business of design or the industry of design?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Camille. I'm very excited to be here. I always wanted to be a designer, even as a child. I mean, so this has just been something that I was born to be.
Yeah.
So I did take a convoluted path to design,
Okay.
because when I was, about to go to college, it was the 70s, and my parents were concerned that I would have a hard time finding a job as a designer, since I'm African American. And so I took another route. I was a business major, and I finished school and worked for the government for a number of years, got married, had children. And when my children were about to enter school, I decided that I was going to go back to school and work in an industry that I always wanted to work in.
Good for you. Again, so becoming a mom gave you that superpower almost.
Yes.
It recharged you to live your life for yourself. Because
Yes.
I have to admit, my child was my encouragement too to be like, wait, I still have time. I
Right,
still have life in
exactly.
me. Let me find out what I want
Exactly.
to do.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
wanted to show my children that no
Hmm.
matter how old you are, to just, follow your dream. If there's something
Hmm.
you want to do, go and do it.
Okay. So, what were those steps like for you? So, you went back to school. How was that? Because you're going back to school at a different age. I don't know if you were amongst people the same age as you, younger than you. Like, what was that like for you just to enter in something new again?
Yeah, well, actually, there were a lot of women my age. A lot of women were deciding to change careers.
Yeah.
And so there were quite a number of more mature women in the class. So it wasn't really awkward at all.
Great.
And I mean, it was just a great environment.
And supporting each other. I wonder if a lot of
Yes.
you were like, well, the first time around was for my parents. This time around is for me.
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Oh, that's great. Well, I love that because I think so many people during the pandemic kind of shifted that focus as well of
Hmm.
getting into a career or feeling the need to change careers to more focus on what their passions were or what they felt their purpose might be. So to
Yes.
hearing that not only can you make that transition, but be successful a second time around, so to speak, in a different
Yes.
career. So
Yes.
different from working with the government to now working
Exactly.
in interior design and be able to build that career in that on that as
Hmm.
well. So how did you do that? I mean, I hate asking these questions because it's one of those things where you're like, why did they only ask women this? Well, other women need to know still. Like, so how were you able to balance all of that, a new career and being a mom? Because it was a school. I mean, with them being in school, maybe you were able to just your schedule aligned with theirs. But if it didn't, how were you able to, I guess, fix all of that or balance all of that?
Yeah, well, I did go in the evening, and I mean, it was tough. And FYI, I did end up getting divorced. So
Oh,
I don't know if I handled it.
well, not everyone is able like, what is it? They say everybody's around for a reason or a season, so he
Exactly.
wasn't part of the second part of the journey either.
Exactly.
New chapter,
Exactly.
new life,
But,
new husband. Yeah.
yes, exactly. But going on and having to, you know, raise my children, even though, it was a joint thing, but I had primary custody. So, I mean, it was a
Mm,
thing where, I had to juggle things.
mhm, mhm. And does during a time where it's not so like, I don't know if it's easier in some aspects because we do have so many virtual options now as far as school and so on, but again, I hate asking those questions of women because it's not always asked of men, but at the same time, it
Yeah,
doesn't change the fact that we are usually the breadwinner. I mean, not the
right. The
breadwinner. We are the home.
primary,
Yeah,
yeah,
we
the
are the ones
primary
that are.
caretaker. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a lot to undertake and also
yeah,
to go back to school. And interior design is pretty much working for yourself at that same aspect too. So balancing being an entrepreneur, how did you go about getting started and building your career as an interior design? Because even that's not so easy. And
yeah,
which is
yeah.
why the Kaleidoscope Project is
It,
so needed and such a great opportunity. But it's good to hear how you were able to do that before the Kaleidoscope and what a difference the Kaleidoscope is also helping
yes,
make.
yes. Well, I actually started out working at our area design center.
Okay.
So I kind of took a different path. When I was in school, I worked at one of the showrooms and they hired me full time for their sales floor. So I worked in several showrooms. I worked at
Mm.
Cravat, who was a sponsor of Kaleidoscope. I worked at Century. And that was like the best education ever because I was
Good.
surrounded by textiles and case goods.
Mm.
So I really learned a lot about how things are made and different types of fabric. So that was invaluable. And I
Mhm.
got to meet every major designer in the DC area. So that in itself was, and working in the showrooms, we would have guest speakers. So I got to meet Mario Buata. I got to meet David Easton. I mean, so I met some great designers, and they actually advised me on,
Mm.
when I would ask them about going out on my own, and they would give me advice. So
Mhm.
that was great. So, but in 2004, my daughter was about to start high school, and I decided I wanted to be home again,
Mhm.
just so that you know I knew that my daughter wasn't going to be home for much longer. I mean, it's sort of
Mhm.
like elementary school, middle school, what trouble can they get into? But high school is like, maybe I should be home, and so
Yeah, no more overnights.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
I decided to go out on my own. Of
Mhm.
course, I had never worked for another designer. So everything I knew was, from a book of how to run your business. But thankfully, I
Mhm.
did have some very good friends who were in the industry that helped me along.
Yeah, and then mentorship is really
Yes,
invaluable,
yes,
and
it
that's
was it was
something.
incredible.
Yeah, to have that experience from working in the showroom first, to even see it
Hmm.
from the manufacturer side of things first in that way too, and getting kind of insider information from designers as to why they're
Yes,
pulling certain pieces and so on, or
exactly.
certain fabrics. So, I mean, I worked retail, so I can see how it can be valuable
Yes,
on
yes,
that side. And I worked a few showrooms back in the day, and what an experience. So,
yes.
speaking of experiences and working with lots of designers, and a full circle moment when you get to work with the same sponsor that used to work in their showroom. So, talk about how you found or how you became about the Kaleidoscope Project. How did you get involved?
Yes, well, a very good friend of mine whom I did meet while I worked at Century,
Okay.
Denise Guadalupe Rojas, who was also a designer in the Kaleidoscope Project. She actually brought it to my attention.
Okay.
She had already accepted a space, and she said, they're looking for, a couple of more designers. Would you be interested? And I thought, oh, yeah, sure. It was a different concept, because
Mhm.
pretty much everything stayed and there were sponsors. So I looked at it as, I've done four other show houses, and it's a big financial commitment to
Mhm.
do a show house. So I figured, oh, okay, well,
And especially since they're not permanent usually too.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So this was permanent. So there were sponsors who were going to, give us things to, that would stay there. So I thought, oh, yeah, well, I'll give it a try. It's only
Yeah.
6 hours away. I mean,
I'll put my permanent mark in Berkshires. Yeah, why not?
yeah.
During
So,
a pandemic.
yeah, exactly. So it was, I mean, it was actually a great experience because there were actually three of us from the DC area and we were already friends. But I think we became even closer
Yeah.
through this experience. So it was wonderful.
Now, share a little bit about your room for those of us who have not seen it yet in person. Can you describe what was that process like? How you decided which palette, or what was your inspiration for your room as well? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, one
Okay.
of the things I've always done, and I think it's just a leftover habit from working in showrooms, is
Mhm.
whenever I see fabrics or wall coverings or any case goods that I love, I get tear sheets or get samples and put them in a little folder because I say, oh, if I ever do a show house, because a show house is reflects you. It's,
Mhm.
you're the client. So I kind of keep a special folder. Well, a few months before Kaleidoscope, I received some samples, wallpaper samples from Philip Jeffries, and there was this plaid, and I'm crazy about plaid and checks. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna use this and something. And so this project came up. And so that was sort of the jumping off point. And since it was in New England and the Berkshires, I had never been there before, but I kind of pictured it very much like the Lake District in England. And when I
Mm.
actually went to the Berkshires, it did remind me a lot of that area. So I sort of use that as my inspiration. I really love English design. I really love using big prints and patterns. So that was my inspiration. I
Mhm.
actually named the room after one of my favorite books by Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. So the room is called the Bennett Suite after Lizzie Bennett.
Well, in my world, it's gonna be after my family name. Because I think, it's not a close it's not, like, directly my last name Bennett or maiden name, but, a lot of my cousins have the last name Bennett.
Really, really.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, wow.
So I'm gonna make sure I tell them, like, they have to stay at the Bennett room.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
how neat. That's fantastic. I mean, it might not be spelled the same way because I do believe there's several different spellings that
Yes,
circle
it
around,
is. It
but
is different. Yes,
yeah,
but
so but
still, it's pronounced the same. So
right. So in our world,
yes, yes,
for all my Bennett relatives, there's a room named after us.
right.
So wow, that's really neat. So because there's been I've heard different inspirations behind the different rooms, whether it was they were naming it after an icon or someone they knew personally within their own family or so on, but not yet from a book. And it's interesting because when I look at all the different rooms, I'm like, wow, what a nice writer's retreat. No matter what room
Hmm.
you're in, it's just like a
Yeah,
different theme of what you could write based on the
yeah.
room. Like, that's what I think when I'm looking at the different rooms. And so to hear that that was your inspiration was a book character and a book, I'm like, well, yeah,
Wow.
no. Maybe I'm psychic. No, I'm not. Oh, so that's so neat though. But um, so as far as your project goes, since you were 6 hours away, how frequently were you able to go up to your room? Because there were some designers that weren't even able to visit their room until the actual day of
Yeah,
installation. So I'm curious
yeah.
for you. You had the luxury of being within driving. Well, 6 hours was still
Well,
kind of a
yeah, it
drive,
was sort of,
but
yeah. I mean, well, we went up. My husband is a contractor, so I, didn't want anyone
oh,
else to do the wall covering, except for him. So we did go up in February just to kind of get a lay of the land because it's really hard to tell from photographs
right.
exactly the real feel of the room.
Mhm.
So we went up in February, then we ended up going back in May to install the wall covering. But then we ended up going every weekend in May until it opened, just getting things together. I mean, it was a little harder. I mean, we're all perfectionists,
All
and
right.
we want it to just be, perfect. So we did a few turn and burns, and
Yeah.
I think we went up maybe 5 times, and maybe 2 or 3 of those were turns and burns. So we just went up that morning and came back the same day.
Well, I'm
So
just thinking, I know you were speaking about your first marriage and this is your second, and
yes,
I'm not going to
yes.
count your numbers. Actually, I don't know.
I've
That's
been
really
married
presumptuous of
several
me.
times, so
I'm not no judgment at all. Because yeah.
only
Anyway,
two.
but
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I'm like, wait, and he was doing the wall coverings and it's plaid, and I'm just like, whoa, are you like
Yeah.
you're really risking it here? So, I mean, but at the same time, I'm like, wait, that's a cute story, probably there. How did you guys
Yeah.
come about? Because I think there was another couple that worked on their project together, Everett Brown and his wife Lisa.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's nice always to hear because my husband has zero interest in what I do. He's very supportive, but at the same time, like zero interest.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm curious for you, like, how did that come about? And how did that work? I mean, my husband and I, like the last project we built together. Oh, wait, we did do our bed together.
Oh.
But for the most part, I learned that it's better to buy things already made or to have it installed
Right.
because if he goes off the instructions, I'm going to lose my mind. And sometimes you do have to go off and it works. But yeah, so that feels like relationship advice. How do you
Yeah.
guys work together? And you had him do plaid wallpaper.
Yeah. I mean, he's a lovely man.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's very easy for me and I enjoy so much working with him because he is so meticulous,
Mm.
to a fault sometimes. Because like for instance, with this wallpaper, we've gone up after work. We didn't get to the inn until like 9 o'clock at night, and he wanted to prime the walls before we went to our hotel room. And so the next morning we get up really early to install, and he's laying out this wallpaper so that the headboard will be centered on the wall covering. And I'm just like, just put it up, I don't care. But no, he
Yeah,
wasn't listening to me.
I can
he
see why, because then everybody's like doing this towards the wallpaper, or
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
like even in the
yes,
pictures, he might be like, see, it's off centered or this.
yeah,
So there's a lot to it, but still,
yes.
that's why I'm like, well, you asked for it.
Well,
It was in
and
your
that's
folder.
yeah, and even though the wall covering installers were very good, but I mean,
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons why I wanted him to do it, because I knew he would take the time
Yes.
to lay it out. But it was also, you're at the point where I just want to go. I just want to get this over with.
And you have a very limited time for everything
Yes,
else too. So it's like,
exactly.
yes, we want this perfect, but we have all this other stuff to do
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
It's not just about the wall
exactly.
covering, sir.
Yes, exactly. Like we
Although
have
the
to
center stage.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that was the first weekend we were,
Okay.
installing the room. So, I mean, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I
Mhm.
work exclusively with him. I mean, I just
Mm.
trust him. I know the quality of work he's going to do, and so
And
I
you have
don't
that
have to
shared
worry.
vision. Yeah.
Yes, I don't have to
And you don't have
worry
to worry
about
about
things.
overtime either.
Exactly. Oh no, I do sometimes, when a project is getting, sort of there's like some difficulty. The only downside is that I have to hear about it,
Mhm. There's
after
no off
hours.
switch.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, dude, it's we're not talking about this.
You're like, can we take a pin in this until
Yeah,
tomorrow and go
exactly.
back to be just husband and wife for the rest of
Ex-
the night?
exactly. That could be the only downside, and that
Yeah.
happens from time to time. But thankfully, love gets us through.
It would have to, right? I mean,
Yes,
and you
yes,
bring up a good point that when it comes to having someone that can share your vision, but also when you do work with such difficult, maybe wall coverings as plaid, that it does take a labor of love
yeah,
to make sure it's done correctly.
yes,
And
yes.
because that is quite, I do not suggest doing that yourself at home
No,
if you're a first time wall cover or
that is correct.
there's a lot to it because it's the floor and the ceiling and this was
Yes,
an
things
older
aren't like,
building, so
oh,
that's like
yes.
maybe things are on a slant, and so like when I saw that, I was just like, wow, she went there in
Yes,
in
I
an older
did.
home, and to now hear that it was your husband, it's like I'm not worthy. I'm not
Yeah.
worthy. I commend you on all of these. So, but moving ahead, I do want to also mention that you guys had so much support with the Kaleidoscope Project, and on Media Day had 35 different media come
Yes.
out. And like, what did that feel like to have so much support for the Kaleidoscope Project? And how do you see things going forward?
Oh, it was absolutely wonderful, and I mean, a long time coming. I mean,
Mhm.
Amy and Patty and Liz, who were the organizers, did a tremendous job. I mean, it was truly a labor of the heart for them. So it was amazing. We just got so much exposure. I think a lot of people operate under a stereotype about, you know, designers of color and exactly what their genre is. Like
Mhm.
it's in their minds is very limited.
Yeah.
And so it was great to see like these 23 designers of color, just running the gamut of
Mhm.
design genres. So it was just a wonderful thing. And it was great to to have other people see it and recognize it. I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, none of us want to be known as the black designer or the Asian designer. We
Mhm.
want to just be the designer, and
Mhm.
hopefully
Mhm.
someone puts the good designer.
The qualified, the
Yes,
talented,
exactly. The
the
talented. Yes,
working,
yes, yes,
the
exactly.
high demand.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. So I mean, I love that there has been so much support, that there's so many different things on the horizon, whether it's Design Week at Dallas Market, but then there's other things coming forward as well throughout the rest of the year and hopefully more things in the future. So make sure you share with everyone where they can keep in contact with you or keep following your journey, whether it's with the Kaleidoscope Project or even with your own interior design business as well, because you have several projects, I'm sure,
Yes, yes.
stemming from that, as well as just everyone is redecorating their house now. So
Right.
all designers are pretty busy right now. So it's a
That
great
is
time to
correct.
get all that exposure that you highly deserve.
Yeah,
So
thank
share a
you.
little bit about that. And I mean, might as well plug the husband as well for where
Okay.
we can follow him as well, because it was his
Yes,
work as
yes.
well.
The
Yeah.
best place to follow me is on Instagram, and my handle is at Iantha Interiors. And my husband, his Instagram handle is at Proper Paint and Paper.
Ah, another sounding, he sounds very British even in that.
Yes.
So is there a British connection for him or no?
It is. His family is, well, from the old country.
Okay. I love it. Okay, so prim and proper.
Yes.
Fits with the plaid in the room and all of it. I love it. You guys are definitely on brand consistently. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure meeting you and speaking
It
with
has
you
been
about this beautiful
wonderful.
project. And
Thank you, Camille.
thanks again for being my guest. And I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me and having us,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, my pleasure. All right. And you guys can keep up with the E Spot with Camille by checking me out at CamilleCoward.com. Thanks again for joining the E Spot with Camille.